It is really an honor and a pleasure to introduce my boss. Janet Napolitano is one of those people that everyone knows something about, but few people know everything about because she's done so much. So let me give you just a sense of that. Of course, she was Secretary of Homeland Security from 2009 to 2013, Governor of Arizona from 2003 to 2009, Attorney General of the state of Arizona from 1998 to 2003, U.S. Attorney for the District of Arizona from 1993 to 1997, and a member of the law firm of Lewis and Rocca in Phoenix before that. So a long and distinguished career in service to our first state and our nation. As Governor of Arizona, Napolitano focused on education, as we heard earlier, from pre-kindergarten through public higher education. She was the first woman to chair the National Governors Association and was named one of the nation's top 5 governors by Time magazine. She has California connections, a BS, summa cum laude, of course, in 1979 from Santa Clara University, where she was Phi Beta Kappa, a Truman Scholar and the university's first female valedictorian. Law degree from University of Virginia in 1983, and in 2010 she was awarded the prestigious Thomas Jefferson Foundation Medal, the University of Virginia's highest honor. I've had the pleasure and privilege of moving to California at about the same time that the president did. So we've had a chance to work together these past 2 years. I've had a chance to watch her, and I'm sure she's been watching me closely too, to watch her as she learned about the university, she learned about the state, she learned about the people, and she learned about our goals and our aspirations. I can tell you that she's a smart, quick study, but more importantly, she has values that are so important to us here at Riverside and to all of us across the state of California. She understands higher education. She wants the very best for the UC, and I have no doubt that she'll find a way to get us all there. It's my pleasure to introduce to you the President of the University of California, Janet Napolitano.
Good morning, Riverside.
Good morning.
I am so impressed to see everyone here so bright and early. When I was invited to speak and they said it was at 7 a.m., I said, no, you meant 7 p.m. No, a.m. And what a great way to start the day here at the beautiful Mission Inn, learning about what's happening in the Riverside community. I'd really like to thank Cindy Roth from the Chamber, Bob Stockton, also for the invite to speak with you this morning. And thank all of the guests who are here. I'd particularly like to recognize our next student, Kevin.
Yay.
Congratulations. You're going to get a great education, and we are delighted to welcome you and see you as a future Highlander. So, great work, Mom. Good job. And also, I'd like to thank all of you, the leaders of Riverside's business, civic, and military community, for spending some time with me and learning about our university. I assume you're not all here this hour because you like to rise with the chickens. I think you're here because you are willing and eager and dedicated to having a public conversation about how we can best move our society forward, and that means how we can move our university forward. So as we allow the coffee to kick in, I'd like to talk with you this morning about the University of California and why it matters to you, to Riverside, to California, and indeed to the rest of the country and to the world. Now, when I began my tenure as president of the university in September of 2013, one of the first things I did was to go out and visit all of our campuses. I knew about the wonders of the UC from a distance. Its reputation precedes me. But I wanted to get on the ground, see the research, meet the staff, the faculty, and the students. I wanted to understand the complexities of the university and the consequences of any obstacle that might keep it from performing its mission. So this was indeed a learning journey for me It opened my eyes in new ways, and it confirmed my belief, not only in UC, but about the value of public higher education writ large. And I know we have other public higher education leaders here this morning. My first visit to Riverside was in early November. It was about a month after I started. And I spent the first day of my visit, part of it, in a campus lab. And there I met a man I now call the mosquito whisperer. His name is Anand Ray. He's a scientist who runs a world-renowned entomology lab at UCR. Now, whispering to mosquitoes sounds funny. It is funny. But being in Dr. Ray's lab, he asked me to be a mosquito whisperer. Really what he asked me was to get close enough to a mosquito so it could smell me, which I did, because he is researching how the sense of smell that mosquitoes and fruit flies have has the potential ultimately to be transformed into different ways that we protect human beings by succumbing to malaria or to dengue fever. And he's remarkable work with remarkable results. And you can understand the millions of people that would entail. Later the same day, I met a scientist named Susan Wessler. Dr. Wessler runs UCR's Campbell Learning Lab. The lab is revolutionizing how young students learn science. Because instead of taking notes in a lecture hall, freshmen in her lab learn the core principles of biology while working on her cutting-edge research in a learning lab right next to the classroom. It's the kind of research most students don't experience until they're an upper division or indeed until they're graduate students. These students were freshmen. So take a look. Her methods are replicable and they are scalable. And it began to dawn on me when I was in her teaching lab that when you try to think of a bumper sticker that encompasses and touches what the University of California is and does, it would be a phrase like this, that California, the University of California, teaches for California and it researches for the world. And when you think about that, then you see the mission of our university. I went to a poetry seminar with the poet laureate of California, Juan Felipe Herrera. It was in a room, actually the poetry seminar was in a room at the New Medical School, and he lit that place up. Everybody in it, and before long I found myself reading poetry, and there was a music part, so I had to make up a song. I did that too. Then the students had to hear me sing. They said, keep your day job. It was just great. And the main takeaway was the relationship between this very distinguished professor and students who wanted to learn about poetry. And that's the magic of instruction. So research, instruction. I dropped in on a meeting with student veterans and discussed with them the issues they face as they re-enter civilian life and how we want to support them as they do that. I met with staff members, I see some here, and heard what they love about living in the Inland Empire and working at this great university. I shared a meal with UCR students from all across campus and found them engaging and thoughtful. And just to top things off, I had my photo taken with Scotty Highlander, near the hub. And if you search hard enough, you can find it on the internet. So when I boarded the plane in Ontario to return to Oakland, which is where I live and work, I was charged with optimism. UCR and the Highlander community as a whole, it's just an incredible place. If you haven't visited UCR for a while, or if you have never visited it, I encourage you to head over, spend a little time there, because it's an important hub for this community. Now, that was just one campus visit. multiply that experience by 10 campuses, expanded to our agricultural extension service, expanded to 3 of the national labs, Lawrence Berkeley, Lawrence Livermore, and Los Alamos. We begin to understand why the University of California is held up as a world model. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I had the occasion to share a stage with the Secretary of the Interior, Sally Jewell. She was there to talk about the national parks movement. I was there to talk about the development of public higher education. And as the conversation unfolded, it occurred to me that the case could be made that the University of California is to public higher education what Yosemite is to America's national parks. And the world at large knows it because throughout the years, just as Yosemite Valley draws international tourists by the busload, Riverside has hosted delegations from around the globe have come to see and learn from the university. They want to know our secret recipe. Now, it's true that in any large, enduring institution, no matter how lauded or renowned, inevitably over time, there will be myths that develop, misunderstandings, and that left untended, they can undercut the integrity of the institution. Like weeds in a garden, they have to be whacked down so before they overtake the good that is being done. So the University of California has a set of myths, and if you'll indulge me, I'd like to address just a few of them. There are myths about basic research, about how much basic research costs, or about its purported irrelevance to the university. As president of the UC, I won't deny how time-consuming and not to mention expensive basic research can be. But basic research is the lifeblood of the University of California, and for that matter, all great research universities. It transforms what our professors teach and how they teach it. It reshapes the curriculum at universities and colleges, and indeed even in high schools. In fact, even in elementary schools. It creates new knowledge about the world in which we live. It was, for example, a UC Berkeley scientist who identified the BRCA1 gene after years of basic research. This is the single gene that can cause not only breast cancer, but ovarian cancer. Probably the single largest scientific development in the treatment of breast cancer. I applaud the walk that is happening, and think about, when you go on that walk, the basic research that led to where we are. It was a UC Santa Cruz astronomer who revolutionized our understanding of the large-scale structure of our universe. And it was a biologist just down the road at Riverside who discovered that plants produce a stress hormone in times of drought. His name is Dr. Sean Cutler, and thanks to him, we now know how to improve the growth of plants despite extreme drought conditions, like those in which our state now finds itself. I don't think we go up and counsel the plant, but there are ways to treat the plants so that the agriculture remains as robust as we know it. A basic research mission is what distinguishes research universities from all other different kinds of institutions of higher education. And we are a research university. We were designed by the master plan in California to be a research university. And it means, again, our professors not only transmit knowledge, they transform it from the croplands and computer centers of California to the classroom, to the community, to the state, and to the world. Let me go to another myth. There are also misunderstandings about the range of our student body and who puts the bill for their education. This is very important because the notion we may provide an elite education, but we are not an elite university in the sense of who our students are. When UC was founded in 1868 up in Oakland, its initial class contained 12 students. Today, we have over 235,000 students. Nearly 90% of our undergraduates are California residents. Nearly 1 in 3 are transfer students from our community colleges. 42% of our undergraduates come from low-income families. What does that mean? They come from families that make less than $50,000 a year. And another 42% of our undergraduates are the first in their families to attend college. Either parent attended college. Think about that. That's almost 80,000 students. And as those students graduate and go on to start their own families, my hope is that not only will they be the first in their families to go to college, they will be the last in their families to go to college. Advancing social mobility is not just a byproduct of what UC does. It's a fundamental piece of who we are and a fundamental piece of our mission. Now, I can't speak with an audience like you without mentioning the T word, tuition. Annual tuition, the full sticker price for an in-state resident is right around $12,000. I'd like it to be free, or $75 or $100. I hear from alumni, oh, when I went to the UC, blah, blah, blah. Well, times have changed. But let's keep it in perspective. To put in perspective, if you paid the full sticker price, and I'll get to the if in a moment, but if you paid the full sticker price for 4 years, you would pay basically what you would pay for a well-equipped Ford 150 pickup, right? No, I know some of you guys have. And a college degree, unlike an F-150, does not depreciate the moment you drive it off the lot. The opposite is true, and it remains true for life. That said, now I'm going to the if part of the sticker price. 75% of our resident undergraduate students receive financial aid. 55% of our California resident undergraduates pay no tuition at all. Because Pell Grants, Cal Grants, and what we put into financial aid from the university, anyone from a family that makes less than $80,000 a year will have their tuition and fees covered. For those, for those who do pay, or who don't get a full ride like that, and come from families that make up to $150,000, the average grant from the university is a $7,500 reduction in tuition. So, one of the reasons I can come up here and say we have all these first generation and lower income students is because the University of California, a public university, has its doors wide open, and one of the ways we keep the doors open is by having a very robust financial aid program. Now, let me go to our budget at the University of California. The University of California's budget, the whole thing, is $26.7 billion a year. If it were a state, we would be in the top 20 in terms of the size of our budget. The budget of the UC is almost 3 times what the entire state budget of Arizona was when I left as governor. I'm just trying to put it in perspective. Now, let's talk about what goes into that $26 billion. Roughly half of it is accounted for by medical centers, clinical care, and what we call auxiliary enterprises, the things like student housing, which are paid for separately from tuition. So that's half of the budget. Another 25% is accounted for by research grants and private support, a virtue of all of which is donor restricted. In other words, we can get a federal grant to research a particular aspect of a gene in cancer therapy, but we can't spend that money to help open up cell biology classes in the undergraduate school. It has to be used for its designated purpose. So the actual core operating budget of the university is about $6.9 billion. And it's comprised of two parts: the state appropriation and tuition. When the state during the recession slashed the appropriation of the university by a little over $1 billion over the course of about 15 months, that was a huge, impactful cut. It represented a third of the state's contribution to the budget of the University of California. And what happened then is that instead of the state putting in more money to educate its students and tuition accounted for, the reverse happened. And it happened not because tuition went sky high, it happened because it had to go up to fill in the gap left by the state cuts. Let me give you another sense. Right now, today, the state provides to the university the same amount it did in 1997. 1997. We have 75,000 more students than we did in 1997. It's like adding 3 more Riverside campuses than in 1997. So, sadly, since these cuts have taken effect, our students pay a larger portion of the cost of their education than the state does. We should not be happy about that. That's just wrong. There is somewhat of a silver lining. You always got to look for a silver lining. I always do. You focus on what counts. At the university, we focused on tightening our belts, cutting waste, creating efficiencies, consolidating amongst the 10 campuses where we could. We had launched an initiative called Working Smarter. To date, that has resulted in $660 million of savings and improved fiscal performance, and we are not done, and we'll never be done with that. We're going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing to run this university as effectively and efficiently as we can. We created, for example, something called UC Path right here in Riverside. What it is a central payroll system. Now, you may think payroll is easy. This is like putting a man on the moon. It is one of the most complicated projects, and I have worked on merging IT systems at the state level. I've worked on it at the federal level. It's incredibly tough, time-consuming, expensive, never comes in under budget and on time because it's complicated, and UC is really complicated. Our UC path is getting ready to open. We see the light at the end of our tunnel, and we're going to base all those services here at Riverside, and as we get that system up, there will be other systems that can consolidate to the Riverside area. So I'm going to go over that. I'm going to go over there after we finish up, after the roundtable this morning. But I just wanted you to say that even in tough budget times, regardless of budget times, we want to keep our pedal to the metal where cost savings are concerned. But the fact remains that even with state revenue up and the recession behind us, we still are about $500 million down from where we were before the recession. And we continue to meet enrollment targets and demand and satisfy to the best we can our commitments under the master plan. Now, I'm a former governor, as you know. There are always competing priorities in a state budget. I get that, but at some point, we have to ask ourselves this question. When did public higher education fall to the bottom of the list of spending by the state? That's literally where it is. And I spent a lot of time in Sacramento Part of the reason it's the way it is because of some of these myths that have developed, and so punching through the myths. But I think it's difficult, if not impossible, to imagine California without the societal, economic, and intellectual stimulus provided by the university. And it is not possible to imagine UC without the energy of California. This 10-campus system is the envy of every other state. It's the envy of foreign countries, and I ought to know. I see what happens in the other states, and I know what our foreign visitors say. It's not a stretch to say that what California has done is to create the Ivy League of the West, but it's a public one, not a private one. And that has helped cities like Riverside and Irvine become university towns, and university towns are economic hubs. Riverside is not pursued solely through the lenses of citrus and suburbia, just as Irvine is no longer understood to be just a lima bean field. Now, feel a little I won't, because I know anybody's got things to do. I just want you to feel how important this university is and what the myths are and the problem, the challenge that we're dealing with. Let me say this. This is not my university. In fact, I didn't even attend the University of California. I wish I had, although I did go to Santa Clara. It was good school, but I wish I'd done it. And the benefits extend beyond one campus. That's the way it's worked in the almost 150 years since the university is. And we need to pay it forward for future generations. So, let me move from platitudes to practicalities. We're knee-deep in the state budget process. Our university is in a big fight. Discussion. We're seeking, helpful support, intervention. Your help would be valuable. Our university needs a stable, long-term budget that will enable us to keep tuition as low as we can and as predictable as we can. In a state with a $113 billion budget, it's difficult to believe that there's not some more funding for the University of California and for the Cal State system, for that matter, which is has been managing its budget by having to severely restrict enrollment. For us, what does that mean? It means an increase of around $100 million a year. Sounds like a lot of money when you just say that. It's a very, very small percentage of our budget. And it's a very, very tiny percentage of the California state budget. And when we were to achieve some part of that, or all of that, we will be able to keep tuition flat for another year for our California in-state residents. So, I'd like you to engage, if you're willing, if you're able. Chancellor Wilcox can help provide facts and data, and his staff can. I'm not going to tell you what buttons to push or what emails to send. You know that. You know the right people to call from this region. But I'm here to tell you this. We need the equivalent of a Verizon Army standing at the ready where you can call state leaders and say, do you hear us now? Remember that old idea, hear me now? Yeah, hear us now. And there ought to be an unequivocal yes coming from Sacramento. This is about more than just a money ask. It's really one of those moments in the public narrative where we might find out a bit who we are as a state, who we continue to be, what we want to be, what we value. Do we want Riverside and its neighbors to lead California with homegrown doctors and teachers and policymakers, or do we need to import them from elsewhere? Do we want this to be a region that attracts young people who are starting out on their own, or a region where young people leave the roads because they can't get the kind of education do. We want California to remain known throughout the world as a beacon of opportunity where people can come and make of their lives what they will, or do we want to shut that door? Do we want to honor the future and play fair with the next generation? I think there's there's an imperative driving this. We took care of the baby boomers pretty well. I'm a baby boomer myself. What about the generations after the baby boomers? What do we need to think of ourselves as paying back to the communities in which we live? The University of California needs your support, and we need your advocacy. Riverside, California, and UC are inextricably related. It's great to hear what's happening at our university here. It's great to see what's happening around Riverside, to hear the presentation of construction in the downtown and what the military is doing in honoring law enforcement and making sure that there's a rape crisis center well-funded for victims of sexual assault. Those are all important and great things. But without the University of California at Riverside, we would not have the same type of community. And I think we all know that. So help us help you, and may I say, go Highlanders.